CapeTalk. Family Matters.
And on Family Matters today, we deal with the issue of education. Joining me in our studios is teacher and motivational speaker Joanne Boshell. And Joanne, our discussion today is around the topic, the issue of our children learn differently. There are others who are, sufficiently triggered by auditory cues. Others want to see things, so they're visual learners. And there are other forms of learning. And you are helping, I imagine, parents out, help their children and make sure that they are more successful in comprehending the curriculum that is delivered to them. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Africa. Thank you. I think that word comprehending that you just used now is really what it's all about. You know, I've been teaching now learning skills and motivational techniques to staff, pupils and parents, and particularly in the younger grade, the parents are very much involved. So I think it's quite important that parents know what's going on. However, there's a fine line between leaving them alone and letting them study independently, because I'm noticing too many pupils, particularly in the grade 5, 6 area, very, very dependent on their parents. In fact, some of my pupils will say they will wait for their mom to get home before they study. So I think we have to have quite a lot of respect for the different types of learning types. And we have the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic. And it's difficult as a teacher because us teachers have our own way, our own learning style, and we have to be careful not to send that over to the other people, our pupils in the class. And it's difficult because we do tend to favor. So what I basically do, Africa, is I focus on the left and the right brain. So although we have all our different learning styles, I don't like to focus on learning styles, because a lot of pupils will say, oh, well, I'm a visual learner, therefore I battle in the classroom. And they're almost by labeling themselves, they actually say, oh, well, then I can't take it in. I've also had parents in my seminars who say, Joanne, I'm sorry, my daughter has to fidget while she is listening to you because she's a kinesthetic learner. Now, that child then is not challenging himself or herself to the other styles of learning. And I really have seen results. I mean, this is my 22nd year now of doing the learning and motivational techniques, is that when a child is actually studying, if they can incorporate a variety of the styles, the visual learners, the auditory learners, to talk it out loud, to talk their work out loud, say it out loud, because a memory is a neuron connection. So in other words, all our neurons in our brain are floating around when we're sitting in a test and we go blank. That's simply because our neurons have not connected. So in order to connect your neurons, you actually need sound. So for example, if I say, please go to the shops and get me bread, eggs, milk, cheese, and ham, you can get into the shops 5 minutes later and you've forgotten. Whereas if you say it back to me, sorry, Joanne, what do you want again? Bread, milk, cheese, eggs, and ham. Just by saying it out loud, your neurons are making a connection. By visualizing bread, eggs, milk, cheese, and ham is even more chance you're going to come back with the 5 items. So I think in all fairness, Africa, I think people just need an awareness. And that's what I try and do in my seminars, is just awareness. Studying should be something fun. Studying should be something that you get involved in. I say to my pupils, when you're sitting down at your desk, get out a sketch pad, pick up a pen, start drawing immediately, start putting things in pictures, in sketches, in mind maps, because the pen leads the brain and the brain leads the pen. And many of the pupils will procrastinate. They put off because they know when they get to their desk, they're dreading it. They've got to read through it all. They've got to try and retain the information. So procrastination is another big topic that will put off anyone off studying, and it can put you off tertiary education, further education.
Or work, for that matter. When you've got a report to you this Friday that your manager is waiting on, you wait until Thursday evening before you do it, because procrastination is... I'm trying to remember the English saying.
Killer of success.
That's the one. That's the one. What I like about what you're hearing, what I'm hearing from you, Joanne, is that it almost doesn't matter what you're being taught or how you're being taught. You, as a learner in this case, and hopefully with the support of parents and other people around you, can then work with what you have, adapt one or two things in order for you to become a successful learner. Because there is a sense that some schools, for example, where a teacher, which you are, have, 30 students in a class. You don't have the luxury of going, I need to get this concept through to you, but you know what? 25 of my kids are auditory and the other 5 are visual, so therefore I'm going to need to play with both. You're just delivering the curriculum. Yes. And the learners have to then use the tools they've got to obviously comprehend what they're being taught.
And it's difficult because some teachers, knowing they've got kinesthetic learners in their class, they let them bounce on a ball at the back while they're taking in that information. But then you have your auditory learners who are thrown by that because it's a distraction.
Exactly.
So I agree. Teachers actually cannot, especially with the classes getting bigger and bigger, can't always accommodate for all those learners. But what pupils need to know is that they need to go home and they need to break that information down. They need to suss it all out. They need to learn it. They can go into Google Images. You know, human beings only think in pictures. We remember in pictures. We dream in pictures. And yet we're all learning writing.
Yeah.
And if we can start turning things into pictures, even with some of the university students I work with, when they're doing abstract concepts, like when we're doing marketing and the accounting and things like that, it's not always easy to draw it. But for example, if you're going to draw, if one of the words are business and all about market segmentation, then draw an orange and segment that orange and then talk it out loud. Hold your pictures up in front of you and become the teacher in your bedroom. And I'm finding the kids tend to love that. I say to them, stand in your bedroom, talk to your dog, talk to the fresh air. Don't always talk to the parents because the parents tend to interrupt a lot. I did that with my kids actually, and then they gave up, which was kind of the idea. Also, parents must be careful, and I hope this helps some of the parents, is that they tend to test their kids once they've studied in a rote fashion way, and rather let parents say to them, okay, you've studied this, now teach it back to me. Pretend I'm a 3-year-old and teach it back to me, particularly with maths. Get a pen in your hand, show me examples, physically do it. So that means our learners are bringing in the kinesthetic ways, they're bringing in the auditory ways by speaking it out loud, and they're bringing in the visuals by their pictures. So I'm a firm believer in have a variety of techniques, get involved, keep it interesting. Make it fun, make your songs, make your rhymes. But either way, you pick up a pen with your sketch pad in front of you. Those kids who are lying on their beds, their body is saying to them, great, we're horizontal. The mind is saying, great, we're horizontal. And we get literally a switch off. And that's when a lot of people get bored, they fall asleep, and they don't take it in because they're trying to take in words. We all know we remember movies more than what we remember words, books. And yet if we can turn our work into interesting stories and movies and make it fun for the actual pupil, they're going to remember it. They're also then going to have the confidence when they're sitting in an exam or test to know that their neuron has connected. They're going to know that they go into a test or exam thinking, I've got this lodged in my memory. There is no way I will be able to go blank. And confidence for these kids is the ultimate. Confidence.
No, it is indeed. My guest is Joanne Boshell. We're talking Matters Education, and we'll go through what an auditory learner needs and what a visual learner needs and what a kinesthetic, I knew I was going to struggle with that one, learner needs. But does any of this resonate with you in any way whatsoever? Give me a call on 021-446-0567. What is your child's preferred way of learning? And are you looking for practical tools of how you can help your child comprehend more? Because that's what it comes down to. The child must be able to comprehend more, which means they understand a lot more of what they're being taught, which means they can apply whatever theory they have crammed into their heads into any practical or exam situation that they find themselves in. 021-446-0567. You can SMS to 31567. You can tweet me at Africa Millennium. Joanne, I'm going to ask you to please put on your earphones so that we can take some calls for you, and whatever SMSs that are coming in, I will read. And the first call is from Errol in Blue Downs. Errol, what's your question for Joanne?
Well, not really a question, but very interesting in what she has said. But you know, we have this problem in our country where teacher training at universities is not what it really should be, Africa. You know, the lecturers will lecture students in their own method, in the method that they would like to see learners being taught in schools. Then, of course, you have the different types of learners that teachers have to contend with in the classroom. You know, there's a 20%, 50%, 20%, 20% above average, 50% average, and 20% below average. And the other 10 are the learners with special needs. And it's very difficult, as your guests so rightly say, in classes of 50 and up, for teachers to actually employ different types of methods. And once teachers have qualified from universities, I don't know why the heck they took away the teacher training colleges. They are only got one mindset, is what they learned at university. And then furthermore, even though the education departments offer further training for teachers, you know, many of them, when they do attend, they don't really take note of what is happening there. most of them, in my experience, and I'm sorry to say this, they just go there for the free lunch. So teachers themselves should, as your guest so rightly say, further their own skills via the internet, via other types of avenues, to cater for, where they can, the different types of learners at schools. And then the last one, Africa.
Yeah.
All our schools are not equal.
Yeah.
You know, township schools have got the bare necessities for teaching, and that is where the majority of your problem lies. And, of course, your reading in your primary schools. That is my comment. Thank you very much.
Errol, thank you very much for your call. I think the part of his call that I want to focus on is in what teachers could do in the limited resources and time that they have. Because remember, the burden on the teacher now is far greater than it was certainly back in the day with whatever the curriculum system that they're using at the moment is. But teachers need to be alert to the different learning styles of their class and try and incorporate as much as possible of the differences in making sure that concept is adequately taught to their students, right?
Yes, I definitely agree. I think Errol's made a few similar points to what I said, but I think, I do a lot of staff workshops, and I have to say on a very positive note, these teachers, a lot of them are really a lot more clued up than what we think. And experience counts for a lot. And when we've got teachers working with these kids, they can also often see the way that they are learning and the way that they are studying. And basically what I do to help the staff is be aware of what your left and right brain are there for. Your left brain breaks down information. It dissects the information in order in an analytical way, whereas the right side is your creative, I call it the arty-farty side. And I think if we're aware of what each side of the brain does, and we can teach our children to break information down, break it down into parts, make it manageable, make it make sense. A lot of especially living in the information age we live in today, so many kids have got access to the Google images. If you're learning about photosynthesis, go into Google Images, find a picture of photosynthesis, because we're going to remember the pictures. And teachers also, they need to bring in lots more pictures into the classroom, not just worksheets and the writing. And I have to say, on a very positive note, I find a lot of these teachers doing a lot more than what we think they are. They're all pretty clued up from what I've seen.
Yeah, no, that's very important. Indeed. There's actually, before we get to Lukman's question, we know that an auditory learner learns by listening, a visual learner learns by seeing, a kinesthetic learner
by moving. Writing, interacting, sticking flashcards on, demonstrating. I had a kinesthetic learner who was doing circuits and electricals and which side goes which, and he actually had to get a plug, take it apart and physically do it for him to learn. And I think auditory and visual learners should also be doing that. Incorporate all three. And if teachers can make kids aware of the three different types of learning styles, we're too quick to label our children. Okay, you're an auditory learner. Therefore, okay, I'm going to switch off when you show pictures. Incorporate all three, especially, to kind of answer the query that Errol was saying is, how do we cope with 50 kids in a class? We're not going to cope with all different learning styles. We need to bring them all in. Let them do all three. It keeps them interested, keeps them concentrating. The variety of techniques is going to keep them motivated. But also I think it's very important for teachers and for parents just to make sure that they've got the correct study ingredients. Put a big sketch pad in front of them with a black marker. Let them have a whiteboard where they can teach it out loud.
Yeah.
Let them do a little study buddy club. A lot of these kids, they work well together. They talk it out loud. They teach it out loud. One learns one chapter, one learns another chapter, draw silly pictures, teach it back outside. Because then you've got the visual, the auditory, you're standing up, the kinesthetic. Studying should be very active. You should be involved in it. I always say to my pupils, put your tackies on when you want to study. Get into it. Get involved. Keeps it exciting.
It does indeed. To your calls now, Yushri is in Plumstead. Yushri, what's your question and comment for Joanne?
No, I just spoke to your producer. I SMS'd you a while back, just to I'm also very involved in my daughter's studying, and for a while, I was very excited to teach her, the magic of mind maps and visual stuff, and she was very excited about it. But as she grew older and as she got into the higher grades, she didn't like it that much, and I couldn't understand why. And I realized that she's not really a visual person like me. And I think the lesson there was sometimes, you think a method works for you, but it doesn't work for your child. So you really need to understand, where your child comes from.
That's a very good, important point to raise, Yusri, because just like teachers run the risk of teaching their method, their preferred method to their learners, parents also then obviously run the same risk.
And then what you can actually do there is actually not being a visual learner, then just encourage, maybe record her voice while she's teaching and let it play it back. Put little sticky notes all over your room so you can see the visuals of it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that one way is not going to work. And also the one way that you are, if you have a particular learning style, then enhance that. My son was very much a kinesthetic learner, and he had to always be moving, and it used to drive us dilly because he had to be moving, and yet that's when he was taking it all in.
Is there any way of negotiating with the learner that we appreciate that you need to move while you're learning, but your learning style will distract? So we'll do some movement at some parts of the day, and then the other parts you will need to, as you said, learn the other forms of learning.
Yes, or what you could say, remember, movement doesn't necessarily mean jumping up and down. Movement could be writing, could be researching, could be typing on the computer. So you could send a kinesthetic learner to the computer and say, right, learn this, and I want you to come back and demonstrate it for us. So there are different ways of handling it. They don't have to be jumping on the back of a ball, on the ball in the back of a classroom.
I think Lukman has probably the most testing question for you this afternoon. He's a grade 11 learner. Lukman, and what's your question for Joanne? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My question is, what's the best way for a visual learner to study?
The best way for a visual learner?
Physics. Yeah.
To study mathematics and physics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Draw it out. Get your sketch pad, break it down into parts. I teach something called whole brain learning, and we're trying to get our kids to learn using our whole brain. So if you can be aware of your left brain is that, especially with physics, especially with maths and accounting and subjects like that, use your left brain to put things into order, break things down, have a look at it on a mind map as a whole picture. So take your chapter, put it onto a mind map as one chapter. Then your right brain will see the whole picture. It's got to always see, some kids just learn paragraph by paragraph by paragraph, and they never really see where it all fits in. So put the mind map on, put it in front of you, talk it out loud. Visual learners, go onto Google Images, go see pictures of what you're studying. You don't have to be reading words all the time. Use your sticky notes, use ideas, use color. But my best advice for a visual learner is turn things into sketches and pictures. Don't draw everything in detail because it'll take too long, particularly in grade 11. I mean, my matric pupils do not have time to draw everything. But just bear it in mind that pictures stick.
Will that help, Lukman?
Actually, it does sound like a good idea.
All right, try it out and give us a call in a week and tell us how much improved your learning has come.
Go and get
has gone along. Okay, Lukman?
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Let's finish off with an SMS question. It reads, one of my children is a kinesthetic learner. So we do studying on the trampoline, running from one glass door to another to write things with whiteboard markers, throwing balls and balloons, doing leapfrog from one piece of information to another, making hopscotch courts with different information. Right now, we're learning geography with a skateboard park, escarpments, plains, plateaus, rivers, etc. That I'm imagining that is a parent who obviously has the time, the energy, and the resources to invest in her child's learning.
And also, you've also got to be able to sustain that kind of learning. Through your high school, you're not necessarily, these high school students are not going to necessarily always have that, available, those facilities available to be doing that. But as a kinesthetic learner, you can also be demonstrating. You can, yes, bouncing on a trampoline can be a good thing. But there is going to be at some part, and a lot of the kinesthetic learners have got to challenge themselves to sit down at a desk, because then they're only using their right brains. They've got to
Because when you're writing an assessment, an exam, you're sitting for those 3 hours in a school hall. You can't exactly be on a trampoline while you're completing your maths exam,
And that's why so many children get into an exam situation and then they just flunk out.
Yeah.
And that's very important. It's a very good point, Africa, is that they need to learn how to also one day sit at a desk if necessary, and use their left brain. So I really just want to challenge my pupils to just go and learn about what each side of the brain does. I mean, I'm very left brain orientated, so I like order and structure and neatness. So I have to challenge my creative side to come up with good ideas on how to learn something, on how to make it fun. And the right brain learners need to challenge themselves on getting in some order and structure, keyword extraction, things like that.
All right. All the left brains want to know where can they find you.
Not telling on radio.
No, telling on radio. Fantastic. Joanne Boshell, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Teacher and motivational speaker. Do you have a website? Or?
Yes, it's just joanneboschell.co.za.
joanneboschell.co.za. We will tweet a link to that website. Thank you very much for exposing us to different ways of learning.